Imagine a hall, large, stuffy, smoke-filled, somewhere in Los Angeles. November of '67. 800 people are sitting shoulder to shoulder, and the air smells of sweat, leather, and fear. Truly fear, not that light excitement you feel before a sports match, but real, animal fear, the kind that rises from the depths of your stomach and tightens your throat. A man stands on the stage. And when I say man, I use that word very loosely. His name was Kurt Wolff, but absolutely no one called him by that name. Across America, from Boston to San Diego, he was known by a single nickname that had stuck to him 10 years prior. They called him the Butcher. He stood nearly 2 meters tall and weighed 185 kilograms, around 400 pounds. Not a gram of fat, only muscle, massive, dense, as if carved from stone. His neck was thicker than an average man's thigh, his fist the size of a small watermelon. When he walked, the wooden planks of the stage groaned and sagged under his step, as if the earth itself didn't want to support him. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. The terrifying part was that he was smiling. Not that awkward smile people wear before a fight. No, he smiled broadly, relaxed, with genuine pleasure, like a butcher picking up his knife before a workday. It was the smile of a man who knew exactly how things would end, and who thoroughly enjoyed it. Over 3 years, he had fought in 17 cities and had never, not once, lost. The recipe for a monster to understand who Kurt Wolff was, you first have to understand where he came from. Monsters aren't born out of nowhere. They are created by specific recipes, and the recipe in the Wolff family was passed down from generation to generation. Kurt's father, Heinrich Wolff, was a Gestapo officer, and not just an ordinary foot soldier. Heinrich was an interrogator, a specialist in questioning, the man they called in when everyone else had already given up. Winter of '43, Warsaw. A young Polish underground officer named Stanislaw Nowak fell into Gestapo hands. He was 28, physically strong, and ideologically unyielding. His predecessors in the interrogation room had broken 5 men like him. Nowak held out for 3 days. Heinrich Wolff was called in on the 4th. Heinrich entered the cell, sat opposite Nowak, and stared at him in silence for a long time. Then he pulled a photograph from his pocket, Nowak's wife, his 2 children, with their address written on the back. He didn't utter a single threat. He simply placed the photo on the table face up and fell silent again. Nowak started talking 7 minutes later. This was Heinrich Wolff's signature method. Not brute force, but precise calculation, locating the vulnerability and striking exactly where it hurt most. This was precisely what he taught his son. Every man is a lock, he would tell young Kurt. Every lock has a key. Your job is to find the key faster than your opponent can hide it. Heinrich Wolff survived the war. After the collapse of the Third Reich, he fled to Argentina, but in '52, he was found dead in the Port District of Buenos Aires. 2 unidentified assailants. No investigation, no arrests. Kurt was 14 at the time. He understood the lesson perfectly. Not that his father was a bad man, nor that justice had prevailed. He realized something else. Force without system is nothing. Power without intellect is just noise, and the best prepared survives. From the age of 14, Kurt Wolff began to train. In 1950s Germany, there was no shortage of men who knew how to fight. Former soldiers, Eastern Front veterans, criminals from the slums of Hamburg and Berlin. Kurt learned from everyone. From a former officer, he took grappling holds. From a Bremen dockworker, bodyweight techniques. And from a mysterious Hungarian settled in Munich, a few moves whose origins the man preferred not to talk about. By 18, Kurt weighed 120 kilograms. By 22, 150 kilograms. By 25, 170 kilograms. The rise of the Butcher Hamburg, '57. A port warehouse converted into an illegal ring. The stench of fish and machine oil. The fight promoter, a stout, red-haired Dutchman named Jaap, had been hosting no-holds-barred fights here for 3 years. Kurt Wolff showed up unannounced. He simply walked in, gave his name, and said he wanted to fight. Jaap smirked and matched him against Otto Brandt. Brandt was a local legend, a former professional boxer whose right hook had once shattered a man's cheekbone right through a boxing glove. 42 street fights, 42 victories. They called him the Hamburg Hammer. The fight lasted 12 seconds. Brandt threw his legendary right hook. Kurt didn't dodge or step back. He simply put up his forearm, took the blow on his bone, and stepped forward simultaneously. His left hand clamped around Brandt's neck, his right around his waist. With one powerful lift, 110 kilograms of living weight was hoisted off the ground as if it weighed no more than a sack of sawdust. The slam against the floorboards could be heard in the far corner of the warehouse. Brant didn't get up, not because he was unconscious, but because at that moment, lying on the dirty wood and looking up at this mountain of meat and bone, he made a very sensible. Yap slowly nodded and said in German, "All right, you work for me." Thus began the career of Kurt Wolff. For the next 3 years, he fought every week: Hamburg, Cologne, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, Brussels. The opponents changed, but the result never did. Grab, lift, slam. In Amsterdam, they put 2 men against him at once. Kurt grabbed one with his right hand, the other with his left, and cracked their heads together with such force that one was later diagnosed with a fractured skull. Both sat on the floor, dazed, staring in opposite directions while the doctor tried to figure out who was still conscious. After that night, several spectators stood up and walked out. They had come to watch a fight, but they had witnessed something else entirely. In 1960, Kurt Wolff moved to America. Here, no one knew Kurt Wolff. But here lay a massive world of martial arts: boxers, wrestlers, karateka, judoka. Here, there was money, hype, and people willing to pay to see the impossible. His first American fight took place in Chicago in February of '61. His opponent was a local freestyle wrestling champion weighing 113 kilograms. The wrestler looked at Kurt without fear, relaxed, confident in his superiority. That lasted exactly until they met in the center of the ring. Only then did that look appear in the wrestler's eyes, a look Kurt had learned to recognize instantly. Not just fear, but something more fundamental. The sudden realization that you are dealing not with a human being, but with a force of nature. The bout lasted 8 seconds. The wrestler was airborne by the third. Yap smiled and counted the money. The Butcher's Challenge for the next 6 years, Kurt Wolff was a legend of the American underground sports scene. 17 cities, 0 defeats. But what brought him true notoriety was the Butcher's Challenge. The rules were simple. Anyone could step up against Kurt Wolff. No rules, no protective gear. You only had to stay on your feet for exactly 10 seconds. If you succeeded, you won $100,000 in cash. Today, $100,000 sounds substantial, but back in '64, it was astronomical. Back then, that money could buy a large house in Los Angeles with a garage and a garden and leave you with change. It was the average American's salary for 7 to 8 years of labor. It was a whole new life, bought for 10 seconds of survival. The cash sat in a briefcase right on the edge of the stage, every single time, in every city. Visible, real, tantalizing, and always untouched. Because for 3 years, not a single soul who stepped onto that stage lasted those 10 seconds. One incident stood out vividly to onlookers. Atlanta, August of '66. Among the challengers was James Cole, a 3-time state heavyweight boxing champion weighing 98 kilograms, possessing a knockout punch of legendary proportions. Cole walked onto the stage confidently. He knew how to handle big men, keep them at a distance, and stay on the move. Cole was smiling. In his mind, he was already holding the $100,000. Kurt stared at him for 3 seconds, then moved forward. Cole threw a left jab, fast, crisp, professional, striking Kurt square in the face. Kurt's head barely bobbed. His stride didn't even slow. Cole threw a full-force right cross, his signature knockout blow, landing it perfectly on the jaw. Kurt blinked once and kept coming. Cole later told reporters, his voice filled with bewilderment, "I hit him with the kind of punch that keeps people down for minutes." He didn't even slow down. It was like hitting a wall. The wall doesn't fall, it just stands there looking at you. Kurt grabbed Cole by the shoulders and squeezed. Witnesses said they heard a dull, crunching sound, like a cardboard box being crushed. Both of Cole's collarbones were shattered. The briefcase remained closed. The crowd was dead silent. Los Angeles, November 1967, and now, November of '67, Los Angeles, the Grand Olympic Auditorium. The International Martial Arts Exhibition, Day 3. The main event of the evening, advertised on posters all over the city. The Butcher's Challenge. Last 10 seconds. Win $100,000. The announcer, a tall American with a voice made for circus tents, wrapped up his introduction and stepped aside. The rest, Kurt Wolff would do himself. The Butcher stepped out from behind the curtain, and the crowd gasped. Even those who had seen him before, at other exhibitions or in photos, gasped because pictures couldn't convey the most crucial thing. How he moved, as if gravity itself was slightly different around him. He walked to the center of the stage and stopped. He stood straight, calm, with that same faint expression of pleasure on his face. Then he performed his ritual. An assistant brought out a chair, a standard wooden folding chair. Kurt grabbed it with one hand, raised it to chest level, and slowly closed his fingers. The wood didn't snap in half. It began to deform slowly, inevitably. The metal legs bent and twisted together. Within seconds, Kurt held a shapeless lump of splinters and twisted metal. He tossed it onto the floorboards. A woman in the fifth row stood up and walked toward the exit, slowly, with dignity, without looking back. She had seen enough. She didn't want to see what those hands could do to a human being. The challengers fail. First up was Ray Douglas, a Marine weighing 106 kilograms, a veteran of Korea who wasn't afraid of big men. He was a big man himself. Kurt stared at him for 3 seconds, then charged. Douglas did everything right. He didn't back down, held his ground, and braced for the attack. It didn't help. Kurt's hands tore through his guard like a knife through paper, and his fingers clamped shut. Douglas felt his ribcage begin to compress, a steady, mounting, unstoppable pressure that yielded to nothing. By the second, his feet left the ground. By the third, his face began to change color. On the fourth, he tapped out 3 times, tap, tap, tap. Stop, I quit. 4.1 seconds. The hall was silent. Second was Kenji Yamamoto, a Japanese judo master, 3-time Pacific Coast champion, weighing 92 kilograms, with a face reflecting years of rigid discipline. He had a plan. Judo is the science of using an opponent's momentum against them. The larger the opponent, the better judo works. Yamamoto believed this. He had practiced it for 20 years. As Kurt moved forward, Yamamoto stepped in to meet him, catching Kurt's arm with both hands, attempting a hip throw. The arm didn't budge. He pulled harder with his entire body, channeling all 100,000 repetitions from his 20 years of training. Yet Kurt's arm continued moving in the same direction, at the same speed, as if Yamamoto didn't exist. Then Kurt adjusted his angle slightly, and Yamamoto was airborne. Not from a martial arts throw, but simply because his feet lost contact with the earth. 3.7 seconds. Yamamoto got up on his own, dusted himself off, and bowed not to Kurt, but to the empty space in front of him. There was something profoundly tragic in his bow. 20 years of practice, 3 championships, and then this. Third came Miguel Torres, a street fighter with a 10-year record, 101 kilograms, quick feet, dangerous hands. He stepped up not with the confidence of a professional, but with the grim resolve of a man with nothing to lose. He sized Kurt up, spat on the floorboards, and squared up. The crowd felt the shift. There was no fear here, only anger. Torres attacked first, lightning fast. Left jab, right cross, slip left, jab again. Kurt took 7 punches in 3 seconds. He kept marching forward like a tank that hadn't been told it was supposed to be stopped by pistol fire. On the 5th second, Kurt caught Torres's left hand midair, grabbed his wrist, and pulled. Torres was yanked flush, chest to chest. For 0.8 seconds. Torres didn't tap out. He had to be set back on his feet and supported because his legs wouldn't hold him. He clung to the ropes, whispering something in Spanish to himself. What exactly, no one could hear. 3 challengers, 3 defeats. A combined weight of nearly 300 kilograms against a single Kurt Wolf. The $100,000 sat untouched. Any other takers? $100,000, 10 seconds. Anyone? Silence. 800 people sat mute. The math left no chance, physics left no chance, and common sense screamed. Stay in your seat. I'll try, and then from the middle of the room a voice rang out, quiet, calm, utterly composed. I'll try. 14th row, seat 6. A man stood up. The first thing the crowd noticed was his size, or rather, the lack of it. 1. 71 meters tall, 63 kilograms, 5 feet 7 inches, 135 pounds. A black jacket with a mandarin collar. No uniform, no belt, just a man. A wave of whispers washed over the crowd. Someone laughed, not maliciously, but out of sheer disbelief. A woman a few rows down leaned to her husband. Someone has to stop him, he's going to get killed. Someone yelled, Don't do it, kid. You have nothing to prove to anyone. The man in the black jacket didn't even turn around. Beside him, his companion stood up, slender, nervous, clearly terrified. He grabbed the man by the sleeve and spoke rapidly in a hushed tone, mixing English with Cantonese. Bruce, I brought you here to watch, not to fight. You weigh 63 kilograms, he weighs 185. That's a 100, just so his strikes would be visible on screen. All of that was true, but it wasn't the main thing. In 1964, the International Karate Championships were held in Long Beach. 500 masters from all over Asia and America, the best of the best. Bruce Lee stepped onto the demonstration floor. Within 20 minutes, those 500 masters were dead silent. Not out of politeness, but out of that unique stupor that comes when you witness something that contradicts years of your own experience. He demonstrated the 1-inch punch. His fist just centimeters from the target, and a 90-kilogram man was sent flying backward several meters without any wind-up or static posturing. He would hold a coin on an open palm, tell a volunteer to grab it, and invariably manage to pull the coin away and catch the volunteer's hand before they could close their fingers. One of the masters, a man with 40 years of experience, later remarked, "He moved as if his body received signals faster than physically possible." But the most important thing about Bruce Lee wasn't how he moved. It was how he thought. During this period, Bruce was developing what would later be called Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. Not a classical style, not a rigid set of techniques, but a combat philosophy built on a single principle. No useless movements, only what works. And this was the exact way of thinking he brought with him to that Los Angeles hall in November. 3 days prior, Bruce had been sitting at home reading. Dan Inosanto called him at noon. Dan was his student, one of his best, and he knew a fundamental trait of his teacher's character. Bruce Lee was physically incapable of ignoring an unsolved problem. The moment he faced a problem with no obvious solution, something inside him clicked, and he couldn't think of anything else until he found the answer. Dan knew this, and that was why he called. There's a man at the exhibition. They call him the Butcher. 185 kilograms. He's destroying fighters all over the country. No one has lasted 10 seconds. No one. A pause on the other end of the line. Dan timed it, 4 seconds of silence. He knew this silence. It meant Bruce's brain had just switched into analytical mode. His technique. Bruce asked. That's the thing, there is no real technique. He just grabs. His muscular strength is so immense that any technique becomes irrelevant. In Atlanta, he broke a guy's collarbones just by squeezing. In Chicago, a boxer hit him flush in the jaw. He didn't even slow down. How exactly does he grab? Dan was caught off guard. What do you mean? His entry into the clinch. How does he close the distance? Does he rush or wait? Does he move in a straight line or angle off? Which hand goes first? He charges head-on, straight, no slipping. Both arms spread wide, like a bear before an embrace. Once his hands close around you, your feet leave the floor, and after that, it doesn't matter. Silence. This time for 6 seconds. To make that grab, he needs both hands open at the same time, Bruce said. Which means that at the moment of closing, while his arms are spread wide, his centerline is open. His chest, throat, and solar plexus are exposed for about 1.5 seconds. A chill ran down Dan's spine. Most people blink once or twice in 1.5 seconds. In 1.5 seconds, Bruce Lee could land 6 strikes. Are you going to face him? Get 2 tickets. The best seats they have. The clash. Water versus stone. Bruce stepped onto the stage. 2 paces. His shoes touched the wooden planks almost silently. If Kurt made the stage shake, Bruce made it whisper. And for the first time, the audience saw them side by side. Kurt Wolf and Bruce Lee under a single spotlight. The image was so absurd that the brain struggled to accept it. A slender man in a black jacket standing calmly next to a mountain of flesh and bone that had just turned 3 serious fighters into ragdolls before everyone's eyes. The announcer approached with a clipboard. Name, Bruce Lee. Weight, approximately 63 kilograms. He paused, looking at Bruce, then at Kurt, then back to Bruce. The lightest challenger prior had been 78 kilograms. Tonight, the lightest had been 88. Are you sure? I know how to count, Bruce replied. Style, Jeet Kune Do. Gentlemen, our final challenger of the evening. Bruce Lee, approximately 63 kilograms, Chinese martial arts. The crowd applauded tentatively, the way people applaud someone who is about to be carried out on a stretcher. Someone yelled, "That's the kid from the Green Hornet. He's going to get killed." Bruce stood in the center of the stage, watching Kurt Wolf. He saw exactly what Dan had described 3 days ago. The wide arms, the low center of gravity, the powerful legs built for an explosive, terrifying first 2 steps. And most importantly, The moment his hands spread wide before the grab. 1.5 seconds. Just 1.5 seconds. He had already run all the calculations. Among the 800 spectators, one man watched with intense focus. 7th row by the aisle, an elderly Chinese man of about 65. His name was Chun Wei, and he had practiced Wing Chun for 35 years. While most of the hall thought the small man was insane, Chun Wei thought otherwise. He knew what Wing Chun was created for. It wasn't for tournaments. The system was born in the narrow alleyways of southern China, where an opponent's size ceased to be an advantage because there simply was no room to swing. Wing Chun was built for situations where short-range speed overcame mass. He gripped his armrests tightly and watched. The buzzer sounded. 800 people held their breath. Kurt didn't wait. He lunged forward, head down, arms spread wide. 185 kilograms at full throttle. Bruce didn't retreat, nor did he step aside. He moved to meet him. A collective gasp escaped 800 throats. A fraction of a second before impact, Bruce slipped to the right, just half a step, exactly enough to clear the line of charge. Kurt's hands closed on empty air, his momentum carrying him forward. Kurt stopped abruptly and spun around. Bruce stood a few paces behind him, calm, untouched, with a light smile. The crowd couldn't comprehend what had just happened. This small man had just made the mountain miss. Kurt growled. He turned and charged again, faster, angrier, with doubled fury. He threw a massive right hook, capable of taking a man's head off. Bruce ducked under the arm, fluidly, almost lazily, appearing at Kurt's side. Kurt's right elbow whipped back to catch him, but Bruce slipped it again. A step back, a tilt of the torso. The strike missed his temple by centimeters. Kurt turned, his breathing heavier. This wasn't supposed to happen. No one had ever made him miss twice. No one. He threw a straight punch, miss. A left hook, miss. Another miss. The crowd began to realize, this was no fluke. This man wasn't running, he was playing. And then Bruce did something unexpected. He stopped, stood straight, looked at Kurt, and calmly allowed him to approach. Kurt lunged, both hands open for the grab. Now he would have him. A split second before Kurt's hands closed, Bruce's right fist shot forward. A short, precise, almost invisible punch. His knuckles cracked into Kurt's cheekbone. The sound was sharp, like a hammer striking an oak beam. Kurt's head snapped back. He stumbled, taking a step away. His eyes glazed over for a fraction of a second. The crowd gasped. For the first time in 3 years, Kurt Wolf had been rocked by a punch. But he didn't fall. He shook his head, wiped his cheekbone, and looked at Bruce. The anger in his eyes was replaced by something else, a cold, concentrated malice. He moved in again, slower this time, more cautious. He was no longer charging like a battering ram. He was stalking like a hunter. He kept his hands low, trying to cut off Bruce's escape routes. Step left, step right. He was cornering him. Bruce let him move, watching, waiting. Kurt leaped, both hands lunging forward. This time, the little man wouldn't make it. But Bruce did. He slipped under the right arm and emerged behind him. Kurt spun, his left fist flying toward Bruce's head. And here Bruce stopped. He didn't step back, he didn't duck. He intercepted Kurt's wrist with his left hand, trapping it. The punch hung in the air, centimeters from Bruce's temple. They stood like that for a fraction of a second, face to face, eye to eye. Then, Bruce gently guided Kurt's hand aside and stepped back. It was a warning, clear, calm, and wordless. The crowd understood it. Kurt did not. He roared and charged forward with such force that the stage planks rattled under his feet. He threw a barrage of punches, right, left, right again, over and over. He was no longer thinking about technique. He thought of only one thing, to land a blow on this man at any cost. Bruce moved between the strikes calmly, almost meditatively. One punch sailed over his shoulder, a second grazed his ear, a third slipped harmlessly under his arm. Kurt couldn't comprehend how this was possible. A living man stood before him, not a ghost, yet hitting him was impossible. It was like trying to grasp water. It simply flowed through his fingers. Kurt stopped, his chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face. Bruce just looked at him. No words, no gestures, just a look. And in that look was everything. Kurt roared and made his final charge. He didn't even try to grab anymore. He wanted to crush this man with his sheer weight, his mass, his fury. Bruce did not retreat. He took half a step to the left, letting the charging giant pass, and the moment Kurt was beside him, Bruce's right hand shot forward. The strike was short, nearly invisible to the crowd. An open palm strike, the heel of the hand landing precisely at the base of Kurt's skull. It wasn't a wild, swinging blow. It was like flicking a switch. Kurt Wolff froze. His legs buckled. 185 kilograms began to fall. Slowly, inevitably, like an ancient oak tree finally brought down. First his knees gave way, then his torso collapsed, then his heavy arms hit the planks, and he lay face down, motionless. The silence in the hall was so profound you could hear the wooden stage creaking under the weight of his body. No one cheered. No one clapped. 800 people stared at the stage in mute disbelief, because something that should have been impossible had just happened. A 185 kilograms giant, who hadn't been stopped by anyone in 3 years, lay flat on the floor, taken down by a man weighing 63 kilograms. The aftermath. Kurt stirred, slowly, painfully, trying to push himself up on his hands. Bruce stood nearby, watching him, not moving. Kurt raised his head, looking up at Bruce. For the first time in his life, Kurt Wolff was looking up at an opponent. He tried to get to one knee, stopped, looked at Bruce again, and something in his expression changed. There was no more rage, no cold calculation, none of the butcher's smug smile. There was only one quiet, heavy, undeniable realization. Tonight, he had met a man he could not beat. Kurt slowly lowered himself back onto the planks, rolled onto his back, and stared at the ceiling. Then the hall exploded. Not immediately. First, there were 3 seconds of absolute, ringing silence, as if 800 people had simultaneously forgotten how to breathe. And then, in a single unified impulse, everyone stood up. Screams, applause, the stomping of feet. The old wooden floor shook harder than it ever had under Kurt Wolff's steps. Chun Wei, in the 7th row, sat motionless, the only person in the room who didn't stand. He looked at the stage, gave a slow, barely perceptible nod, and fell silent again. The journalist in the press box stared at his notepad. He had already written the headline for tomorrow's paper, and now he had to scrap it entirely. He crossed out his writing and sat for a long time, holding his pencil over the blank page. Bruce lowered his hands, took a step back, and gave a brief, untheatrical bow. He turned, stepped down from the stage, walked through the crowd, and returned to seat 6 in the 14th row. Dan collapsed into his seat next to him, still shaking. "How much time passed?" he gasped. Bruce paused, pulled a program flyer from his pocket, and slowly smoothed out the crease with his thumb. "I wasn't counting." Dan stared at him. "Bruce, you just—" "I know. The briefcase with the money is still there." Bruce glanced toward the stage. The briefcase sat on the edge, open, $100,000 untouched. "You're not going to take it?" Bruce rested the program on his knee, thinking for a second. "I didn't come here for money." On stage, the promoter approached Kurt Wolff. Kurt had managed to stand up, looking out into the crowd where the small man in the black jacket had vanished. The promoter said something to him, but Kurt didn't reply. Kurt slowly turned his head, looked at him, then back at the crowd, and quietly stepped off the stage, disappearing backstage. No one saw him again that night. The lesson of the night, what happened at the Grand Olympic Auditorium on November 11th, 1967? Everyone who had stepped up before Bruce had tried to solve the wrong problem. They thought, how do I survive against this force? And the force crushed them. Bruce Lee framed the question differently. He asked, where is the vulnerability in this system? And found the answer. The others looked at size, he looked at movement. The others feared the strength. He sought the moment of its absence. The others believed a collision was inevitable. He realized you didn't have to collide at all. A question for you: when was the last time you stood before something that seemed insurmountable? A problem, a person, a situation that felt like 185 kilograms of charging mass, where it seemed there was no choice but to take the hit. How many of us in those moments freeze, retreat, or launch into a head-on collision? And how many of us stop, observe, and search for the trajectory? The 1.5 seconds when the center line is open. Because it is always there. Every problem, every obstacle has a moment of vulnerability. A moment seen only by those who seek it with intent. Bruce Lee didn't leave richer that night. The $100,000 remained in the briefcase. But he proved to himself and to 800 witnesses something far more valuable. That mass is not destiny. That speed of thought is sometimes more crucial than speed of strike, and that the most dangerous person in any conflict is not the biggest, but the one who thinks differently. As the hall quieted down, people sat back in their seats, staring at the empty stage. Dan Inosanto broke his long silence, asking softly, "You could have struck him, really struck him. Why didn't you? Bruce stared straight ahead for a few seconds.